Hello and welcome to another episode of AI Buzz. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today I'm going to talk about 5 things that I wish I knew before I started working in the data field. While I absolutely love the field, there are definitely things that I did not expect before I started actually working within the field. Let's get into some of those now. The jobs can be really competitive, and if your goal is to become kind of a data scientist, data engineer, you may need to take a job where you can kind of prove yourself first before you're able to really have the credentials to apply and get some of those jobs. It's yet another example of that classic catch-22 where you need a job to get a job. There's also just a lot of people applying to these positions because by now everyone's pretty aware that jobs in data can pay pretty well. However, there are definitely ways to set yourself apart from the competition. Check out my video on the data project portfolio, especially if you're applying to jobs in a big city like Boston, New York City, California. There will be tons of applicants to some of these jobs. I've seen jobs on LinkedIn where there's over 1,000 applicants for a single data scientist position. So when I was applying to these jobs, I didn't expect them to be as competitive as they were, but I took some steps to kind of set myself apart, and now I was able to kind of break into the field. Next up, we have some items that you'll actually experience on the job. So the first that I want to bring up that I did not expect was the poor data quality. I think this is actually company agnostic. I think every company experiences issues with data quality and making sure that it's really pristine data that they're working with. So to define exactly what that means, nice data would be characterized as having very few or no missing records. It would have very few null values for a particular column. Might not have any anomalous values that are really high or really low, or values that don't make sense. Probably no user entered fields because those are always a mess. When I was studying this stuff in school or doing something like a Kaggle competition, the data was always really pristine. That means there's very rarely any wild things you had to take care of with the data. You had to do some data cleaning, sure, but in the real world, the data can get really messy, and that is probably one of the highest priority things that you'll have to work on. You will definitely be spending a lot of your time kind of scratching your head, wondering why the data doesn't make sense or how a particular value entered a field, or trying to reformat data types into the correct format. So yeah, just how bad the data quality can be is something to expect, but there are things that you can do to kind of mitigate that. And one of those is monitoring. You want really good monitoring processes in place to make sure that your data is really good before you try to do anything with that data. Because if you develop a whole bunch of kind of downstream analytics or predictive models from that faulty data, those are also going to be really off. They're going to be as off as your data was. So go into the job expecting the data to be rough, but try to do things to fix it. So next up, number 3 is scale. This is something that I did expect, but it ended up being a very large percentage of my job, which is how to scale things from your local machine and actually getting things to run in production. A company that is running an application that collects a huge number of records, this is a really big problem, and things that work on your local machine are likely not going to run the same in production when it's trying to scale out to, say, 50 million rows or something like that. Often something that runs well on your local machine will need to be completely refactored to take advantage of something like a distributed compute framework like Spark. Or you're going to have to do some very clever deployment processes to get it to scale out with Kubernetes pods. And also when you're trying to productionize a model or an analytic, make sure that you're focusing in on certain metrics that you're going to want to really pay attention to in production, which is the runtime of the analytic, as well as how much compute you need to run it. These two factors can actually make your analytic lose money for the company, so make sure that it runs in a reasonable amount of time and does not need an infinite amount of compute resources. Definitely remember that running predictions is not free, and running a compute cluster is not cheap, so you want your analytics to be a net profit for the company. Another thing is weird hours. These, I think, are pretty likely in the field of data. Depending on exactly what you're doing, your mileage will vary, but if you're working with data, a lot of times your analytics or your ETL jobs or your predictions are going to be running at off hours when users aren't using the system heavily. So a lot of times these will happen at night, and you may need to wake up in the middle of the night or get up really early or stay up really late to monitor something and make sure that it finishes correctly. This is especially true if you're a data engineer, and business units downstream are depending on your data to be there at a certain time and have it be correct. I would also like to add on to that point is the stress of the job. It can be pretty stressful to make sure data processes run well, because unpredicted things always pop up. And further, even if things run well, you want it to be correct too, because your analysis, your analytics, or your predictions are going to ideally be used by decision makers to actually do things. And you want them to have a lot of faith in what you're telling them to do. Consequences of bad predictions or analytics could cost the company a lot of money, could lose customers, or even worse, could put people in actual danger. It all depends on what type of data you're working with and what you're predicting. But I would say that a lot of aspects of the job can be stressful. The final thing that I wish I knew about working in data is that a lot of people are actually pretty skeptical of machine learning results. This is especially true with some of the older crowd in data. They're very, very skeptical of anything related to machine learning, and it's almost like they're looking for predictions to go wrong to kind of try to discredit the results. It's a lot like what Tesla is dealing with right now, I think, with the full self-driving feature, where people really focus in on any sort of crash or death associated with the technology and completely overlook the benefit in that it could actually be saving lives. They're really just not wanting to adopt the technology, I think. And I do wonder if a lot of these cases are due to the fact that people have tried to apply machine learning in the past to a problem that may not have needed it, and it performed really bad, and that kind of soured people on applying these types of models. But there definitely is a time and a place to apply machine learning. That's about all I have for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you liked the video, drop a like as well as a subscription to the channel. I'll be coming back at you very soon with more AI and machine learning related content. Have a good day. Bye.